You ever find it difficult to keep your audience engaged? You want to hear a secret that helps people stay interested in what you have to say? Humor is a spice that warms people up to keep them listening. When people laugh, they learn. In the next few moments, I'm going to talk about how you can use humor to add the spice to keep people listening. And I'm going to talk about the what and the how of humor. So first off, let's talk about what is humor. Mel Brooks famously said that it's a tragedy to get a paper cut, but it's comedy to see you fall down a manhole and die. Ouch. The problem with comedy is that it tears people down, and the only end is to just get a laugh at somebody's expense. Whereas humor is different. Humor builds people up. And humor also is not an end in and of itself, it's a means to an end. It's that proverbial spice to the meal, to enhance the flavors, to help people wanting seconds. So first off, let's talk about what is humor. And I'd like to distinguish it from comedy in this way. Here's an example of comedy. This comes from a man named T. Chendal Kumar in India. We call him CK for short. He says that there was a guy who was a music critic, and he was asked to come to a young violinist recital. And afterwards, he was asked, well, how do you think he did? And the critic says, well, he's reminded me a lot of Beethoven. The fan said, wait a second, Beethoven, he wasn't a violinist. And the critic responded, neither was that guy. Ouch. You see how, just to get a laugh, that wound up putting down somebody? As opposed to that, humor lifts people up. So here's an example of a humorous story that has a point. Once there's a guy who was out of a job, and he was looking through the Sunday One ads, and he wound up finding an opportunity at the local zoo. The curator said, here's the opportunity. We're a small zoo. We just lost our prize gorilla, and we don't have enough money to get a new one. What the opportunity is now is for you to get into an ape costume, take a couple weeks of mannerism classes, and show up for the big promotion. He says, I'll try anything. I'm desperate. So what he did was they had a big promotion. 250 people showed up, and he got into his routine, got all excited. He had the bright idea to get up on the monkey bars and do a few revolutions to the crowd's amusement. The only problem was, on one of the revolutions, he lost his grip and flew over the fence into the lion's den. The crowd came over to see what was going to happen. Who would win, lion or gorilla? He was shaking in his boots, not knowing what to do. And then something fateful happened. He felt a paw on his shoulder, and then he totally lost it. Help! Get me out of here! I'm not really a gorilla! Help! And then he heard a still, small voice from behind him saying, be quiet, or we'll all lose our jobs. The moral of the story is that clothes don't make the man, but who you are is really where your heart is. I have a friend at work who is an expert at leadership, and he says it this way. His name is Lamont Gilbert. He says that of which you are most passionate is your vocation. It's not your title on the outside. It's what you have passionate about. So you see the difference between humor and comedy? I'd like to mention one last thing. How you get laughs is due to an element of surprise. What you do is either physical or intellectual comedy. I'm not talking about physical comedy here. It's slapstick like Jerry Lewis or the Three Stooges or Laurel and Hardy. I'm talking about intellectual humor. And for this, I'd like to cite a guy named Rick Olson, O-L-S-O-N. You can look him up on the YouTube channel. And he has this thing called the laugh generator process. He says that studies show that people listen at a rate of 800 words a minute, but we can only speak at about 150 to 200 words a minute. So what that causes people to do is naturally jump ahead to an assumed conclusion. We use that against them to surprise them, to get that surprise. Now that you know what humor is, I'd like to tell you how to use it. This is going to be more of a workshop. For this, on the what side, I'd like to cite a book called The Story Theater Method by Doug Stevenson, especially in chapter 15 where he talks about impromptu comedy. He has some tools for us, which I'd like to share with you today. One way to get that surprise is to use a change of assumed subject. Here's an example. You ever wake up grumpy? No, I just let her sleep in. You see how I changed that on you? Another one is that they say comedy or humor winds up coming in threes. And the reason why is because you set a trajectory for the first two items in the sentence, and the third one is assumed conclusion along the same direction. You switch that up for them for an aha zinger, and that creates a laugh. Here's an example, again from CK of India. He said that there's three guys talking about getting into an argument with their wives. The first one said, "My wife threw me out of bed." The second one says, "My wife threw me out of the house." The third one says, "My wife came crawling to me on her hands and knees." The other two were kind of quizzical and asked, "Well, what did she say?" She said, "Get out from under that bed and stand up like a man." You see how that's a little bit of a surprise. Another way, another tool is the clarification. Jim Gaffigan, he's a comedian, he often talks about food, and he says, "I'm a vegetarian." "Well, I'm not a strict vegetarian. I eat pork and beef, just not fish. That's gross." And finally, I'd like to share with you a misunderstanding of that conclusion. This comes from the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the aunt of the bride hears that the groom is a vegetarian. And so she comes up to him and says, "You don't like meat? No problem, we give you lamb." See, she misunderstood that lamb is also meat. Now that we understand how you can apply this, I'd like to help you by using the laugh generator process of Rick Olson. Here's how you create a humorous speech. Number one, you write your speech from something personal, either a powerful experience, a professional experience, or a painful experience. You don't start out trying to be funny. Again, to be a humorist, you don't have to be a funny person. What you do is you write that story, and then you look at lines on the second step, and you find about, in the phrases, if there's an assumed conclusion that will allow you to switch that up. Thirdly, you'll look through all the lines and see if there's something that is not really pertinent to the point you're making, edit that out. And finally, you do the 3 Ps. Practice, 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 because proper practice prevents poor performance. Let's do that now. I'm going to give you a line, and then you have to come up with 10 assumed conclusions where you switch the conclusion up. And the reason why Rick Olson says you need to do that is because the first 9 aren't funny. In fact, I saw Jerry Seinfeld on a show with Jimmy Fallon where he showed a lot of his material on a city street, and he was able to show that it takes a lot of material before you find something funny. Now, here's the phrase. Guy walks into a bar. That's a normal joke, right? So I'm going to say, "I ran into a bar, ... What's the assumed conclusion? To get a beer. So I'll give you the first one. "I ran into a bar, but don't worry, nothing happened. I just got a few dents in my car." Now, press pause, write 10 different ideas, and I'll come back and share with you some more. Okay, are we back? You got your 10? All right, let me share some with you. "I ran into a bar, and I got 2 points deducted from my Olympics routine." "I ran into a bar to get some strawberry yogurt." "I ran into a bar, but my astute friend ducked." "I ran into a bar," and this is my favorite one, "to buy my wife some underwear." What can I say? I'm dyslexic. Bar, okay. See, if you continue to practice these methods, you'll be able to add the spice to your speech to keep people listening. And I guarantee it that they'll come back for seconds.